And everybody, I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome. Good to have you on board. We have a great podcast for you today. I had not heard anything about this. It's basically, this is one of those your lawmakers at work kind of stories again. And I think you're going to be really interested in what's going on with this. And it's called the Wildfire Response Modernization, and it passed the Oregon Senate. It's Senate Bill number 800. And this was designed to point out and discern areas of Oregon that are most susceptible to wildfires. And it was also in the paperwork, and the legislation was said it will not be used for the purpose of increasing insurance rates for fire insurance for people who live in at-risk areas. But guess what? It is. Already people in Oregon are finding they can't get insurance, or it's costing them a lot more money. Again, it's your government at work. Let's get our sponsors and we'll get right to the topic. Chris Dental, based out of Eugene. Dr. Michael Bratland really cares about the fact that you have a voice and you have a place to use that voice, and that's why we're here. Also, Albert Taylor, based out of Eugene, Springfield, Oregon, working with people with different abilities, always looking for employees, people to work and help out with things. If you're looking for a job and a career that's different, this is a place you want to go. And Matt McCarl, New Leaf Hyperbarics, massage, light therapy, anything that's out there that's different and alternative. Matt does it. It's really hard to get his stuff on YouTube. They do not like anything that's alternative on YouTube. And also Greg Hinkle right here in Montana. He's a mortgage broker or lender, and he can help you if you're moving from Oregon to Washington to Montana, any of those states. Also here in Montana Oral Surgery Dental Implant Center, providing dental implant work. They also, the thing I like the best about them, if you have to have a tooth pulled, they'll knock you out. I like to be knocked out when I'm having teeth pulled. I don't want to be there. I don't want to remember it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And a little later, we're going to show you a little clip from a series that relates to all of this that we're putting on right now for the next 12 months. Is called The Truth About Timber. And for far too long, the anti-logging community has owned the conversation when it comes to managing our timber. Obviously, we're not managing it well. Or right now here in Montana, I wouldn't be sitting in a 290 is what my however they measure that. I'm up to 290. You can't even see 100 yards in front of you thanks to the wildfires. And most of those are burning in Missoula for us and Idaho. So let's get right to our topic. I'm going to bring on a couple of guys here. Jay Tross is a Curry County Commissioner. That's Curry County is the southernmost county in Oregon, right against California, right on the Oregon coast. And Garrett Thompson is with him. He's a building official in Curry County. And then Herman, you say your last name, dude. I am not even gonna attempt it.
Come on, Rick. Give it a try.
Oh, Barsteiger.
It's Bertschiger.
Well, you knew that going in. I was not going to go for the bear.
Yeah.
So now how are you involved with all this going on with this mapping system?
Well, I'm the Josephine County Commissioner, which is right next to Curry County, and I was also spent 8 years as a senator in the Oregon Senate, being the minority leader in the Oregon Senate. So I got a little experience in this.
So Jay, let's start with you. And one of your employees who follows me online said, Rick, you're doing all this timber stuff. Did you have any idea about this map that came out? And I said, no. And so then Jay and I started having conversations. I think people are going to be really surprised by this because I think most people do not know what this is. Explain to people what's going on. And I could put the map up here real fast.
Right. So thanks, Rick. and that young man just had his first child this morning that
Oh,
called
well,
you.
congratulations to him. That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty neat. Um, so what's in front of you is the fire map risk assessment tool, and Herman would be able to give a lot of background on the ins and outs of this being developed. I believe he was in Senate when that was occurring, or at least being discussed. But it's currently Senate Bill 80, and it essentially grows out from the wildfires of 2020 that impacted Phoenix and Talent as far as main population areas, and um, you know, the intention of this map is really a big question for me. Um, the reasoning of creation of the map, but ultimately, this map is having some catastrophic out, out outcomes for our rural communities in particular. If you
So,
notice, go
so
ahead.
Jay, hang on for a sec. Do this, Herman. What was the intent? What was the intent of this map? What? Because when I read, I mean, honestly, Jay sent this to me. When I read this, it sounds like mumbo jumbo. It doesn't sound like I don't. It. I. I don't know what it's for. What's the purpose? I know you probably weren't in.
It's to identify the high risk. It's identify the properties that are at high risk for wildfire in the state of Oregon. But go back to the map, Rick. Can you go back to the map?
I sure can.
Okay, so wildfire as it spreads across the landscape depends on topography, fuel, and the weather. So but let me draw your attention. Can you find Medford, Oregon on there, Rick?
Yeah, and let me do this for people real fast. The high risk areas are the orange.
Correct.
The purple is the next high risk, and then you have the green, which is not very high risk. So for people looking at this map out there in our viewing audience, that kind of gives you an idea of a huge chunk of Oregon, rural Oregon, is listed in this map as highly dangerous.
Yeah, so we have high, moderate, and low. So look at Medford, Oregon, then draw your eyes to the east, where the county line between Klamath and Jackson County. That's about 14-mile long line or more. Let's see where you at here. Go pan to the east.
Okay.
East.
I don't wait. Let me see if I can. Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
I'm
too
too
far
far,
to the
aren't I?
east. Pan a little to the west.
Okay, I just took snapshots of it. So we're talking Klamath County, which if you guys see Lake County, go over one county, and I'm going to go back to the big map.
Yeah.
So it's Medford is in
Jackson
County, right next door to the right, everyone, where you see a little white spot in there. That is the county that Herman's talking about.
All right, that's Klamath. So do you really think that a straight line where you have moderate on one side and high on the other, you really think that's how it works in the real world?
Not in a real fire.
Not in a real world. So the methodology behind the map is what's wrong. Okay, so they want to, if they're going to identify the high risk area in the state of Oregon, the map has to be correct. If the map's not correct, the methodology is wrong, and they're defeating the purpose.
So when you're saying that, Herman, you're talking about right on the border of where you see Medford, right on the border of Jackson County, all that purple, and then it goes to red again, or orange. Is that what you're talking about? That kind of thing?
Well, you look in Jackson County is all red, and then right across the county line is all blue or purple. Yeah, it doesn't. So the other thing is, if you look up north to Salem, that's the Willamette Valley. They have that all in green. Well, anybody that lives in Oregon and visits the Willamette Valley knows that that's the grass seed capital of the world. And when all those thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of grass seed cures in August or July and August, it's a tinderbox. But since that's the political area of Oregon, it's green.
Ah, so So is the map, I still, Herman, I'm having trouble, or Jay or Garrett, any other one of you. I don't understand the purpose of the map. I know it's supposed to outline. So by outlining where are the most vulnerable areas, what does that do?
So then they're going to enlist rules that what you can do and cannot do in those areas.
Oh, now we're getting clear. Okay.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to development, or if you're going to remodel your house or stuff like that. And I'm sure that's why Jay has his building official there.
So Garrett, talk to me about what, because right on the map on the page, people can go find this too, and we'll give them that address where they can go look this up. But right on the page, it says this is not intended, which I find absolutely hilarious that legislators would do this. But it says, I think would think that this wouldn't happen, but it says right on there, this is not intended to be used by insurance companies to raise rates.
Right.
Well, what do you think they're going to do when they find out you've put these property owners in a high risk area, so-called, and what is an insurance company going to do? Of course, they're going to raise the rates. And Garrett, what are you experiencing in Curry County? And I'm going to show people Curry County. Whoops. There we go.
I'm gonna jump in real quick before Garrett goes down the building code about insurance rates. Is that okay?
Yeah. You go right ahead, my man.
Right. So, Herman can attest to this, but during the first listening session, or there was not much listening going on, but we were discussing with the creators of the map it was in Josephine County. We had brought up the fact that it is unthinkable to create a risk assessment tool and not expect a risk assessment company to utilize the tool that has been put forth in front of them. So for the state to say that this cannot be used for insurance is laughable. We've had many constituents coming to us with their policies not being renewed, they're not being able to get policies written, or their policies are increasing to a point that it becomes unaffordable. One person had their insurance. Now, keep in mind their annual homeowners insurance was probably just sub $1,000, and it was raised to over $7,000 a year.
What? Where was their house located?
On the Curry coastline, where 95% of our population resides within 3 miles of the beach of the 101, and so unfortunately, a lot of this is considered high and moderate, mainly high in our high population areas. And so, actually, a commissioner, one of my colleagues here in Cary County, just had his insurance, his renewal denied. He lives in the city, 150 yards from the beach, in a planned community, and they said that his wildfire risk score was too high to continue his insurance, and it was dropped. And how I know that these insurance companies are utilizing this tool is because the creators of the map they've said to all of us, it doesn't matter what you do, your personal property, if you take all the protections recommended, if you build with fire hardening substances, if you create all of the fire resiliency within your property, your risk assessment will not change. And so when they said in his letter, they said, we would advise you to take mitigation measures to reduce your wildfire risk score. But however, please understand that this will not change the outcome of your insurance policy.
So even if you were to build with this, rebuild or reside your house with whatever it is that they're requiring you to do under this, it doesn't change it's not like you're being rewarded for doing what they think is the right thing.
Correct. And not only are they and this is where the integrity of the map comes into play. And Herman was speaking about, as far as my concern, the integrity of the map is completely faulty. And I'll speak on behalf of our residents here in Curry County, who are not strangers to forest fire. We've been subject to over 500,000 acres of forest fire in the last 15 years. All of which I need to note, 100% of all of our wildland fires have started in the state and federal lands that have not been managed since the Endangered Species Act of 1990. So what was not taken into account, in particular for our county, was the fact that we have a natural fire barrier known as the marine layer in the summertime that comes inland 3 miles, saturates the ground, and then recedes back out. We also have 98% of our wind patterns coming from the west to the east, which would push fire back as opposed to onto our populated areas. And one parameter that was really not used or taken out of context was the use of fire history. And what they had done was they had taken recent fire history and considered that, but they hadn't taken historical fire evidence and considered that. Our coastline has not been subject to fire since 1913. So when you put that in perspective, it would be hard to identify a high risk area that has historically not been susceptible to fire due to the conditions that are native to us. But in essence, in one hand, they're telling us all the time, housing shortage, housing shortage, housing shortage.
Exactly.
And in the second hand, they're delivering this map, which requires planning and building restrictions to even move forward with renovations of a current dwelling or the new construction of a future dwelling, which that's why Garrett can explain a lot of what those would be, but essentially making it more difficult, more expensive to build here, more expensive to insure your home here, and ultimately increasing our housing crisis with the effort of creating a map of wildland fires that we know already exist in terms of risk, and we know are not being mitigated because there are zero parameters that the state and federal government have to follow regarding the risk map. The entire onus falls on the private citizens.
Well, and here you brought something up really good, because this kind of relates to my timber stuff that we're doing. So you have a federal government that has basically sit back and wait and watch the fire for too long, in my personal opinion. So we don't, we're at a place in Oregon where everything's a tinderbox. Well, not just Oregon, Montana, Idaho, Washington, look what's happening in California. So you got federal land, which, by the way, for my viewing audience, that means what federal land means. It means it's yours. It means you own it. And you've got people who are not managing it for fire. So now people in rural Oregon are going to pay through the nose if they want to build or fix or live in the rural parts of Oregon. And look at here, surprise, surprise, surprise. Who doesn't get affected? Urban Oregon, the I-5 corridor, Bend, places like that don't get as impacted by this whole thing. It's almost as though they want everybody to live in the urban zones, and they're rewarding people who vote more like they do in the urban zones than they do for people in the rural zones. But it's just so much hypocrisy when we're always, I think people look out there right now and you think, okay, because they've done studies, and people right now, it's like forest fires are a big deal and people pay attention. It's like, because the air is full of smoke. But then as soon as December comes around, they do the same polls and nobody gives a damn, because it's not affecting them anymore. Now it's going to affect them all the time because they have to pay these increased, or they can't get fire insurance. Or what happens, Troy, when there's areas of Curry County or Josephine County, Herman, that you can't even build on anymore because you can't afford to because of all the restrictions. I mean, this is insane.
Well, and we're facing just that, Rick. We've all been facing these housing crises, housing issue. And, our private timber company, South Coast, has been a problem solver for our community. And they purchased a big swath of land. It's it is the largest planned housing development in the state of Oregon, with 1,000 planned homes. They had anticipated starting with the first 130 this year, and the entire area that they plan to move forward with is in the high risk area now, which will completely um, change the scope in which we're able to complete this project.
So Garrett, talk to me about what does have to happen. So if you have an existing home, or if you're going to build a home, what are the new requirements?
So some of the new requirements, they have to do with the exterior of the structures. It will double the cost to clad the outside of a residential building. Any deck that is over 200 square feet will have to be constructed of non-flammable material. And I don't know about you, but my deck is made out of wood, and that will no longer be allowed. So you will have to use steel I-beams and girders, and I guess just have a Trex deck.
Okay, and Garrett, can I interject there too? Because for Oregon and all the sustainability people and all the people who care about the environment, when you build with steel girders, it uses so much more energy and so much more than timber. And timber is a sustainable material that we grow here. It's also a carbon sequestering material. So we'll trade that for something that's going to be harsher on the environment, so that we can save the trees, so that the fires don't. This is like garbly-gook. I mean, are we a sustainable state? Do we believe what we say, or do we, so now we push people to have to use steel, which is the worst. I mean, the worst infraction on our environment in terms of putting carbon into the air. Okay, I digress. Go ahead. Continue, Garrett.
Okay. So all roofing material from this point forward, as soon as this bill is passed, will have to be at least B rated, which means it has to, you have to have a steel roof, B class, comp shingles, terracotta. All of your gutters are going to have to be covered. So products to keep all the debris out of your gutters will have to be used. Your ventilation, most people have plastic vents in their foundation systems and in their heats. All of that has to be changed to steel, which will be, it's just going to be cost prohibitive, especially with the siding. No more wood siding unless you have sheetrock underneath. And at least in our climate, sheetrock does not last on the exterior of a building. You can use products like Den's glass, but that is literally twice the cost of a sheet of plywood to sheet the outside of your structure. And all of your wall covering from there has to be either metal or hardy board, something with that is non-flammable. So, I mean, this is just going to change the styles of construction that are going to be used. It's going to, as I said, double the cost to clad the structures, to weather it in. It's going to further hinder the progress that we've been trying to make in meeting some of these challenges with the housing shortage.
So let me look. I says, do I have Herman's? Where's Herman's? I got to get your county up here. Herman, you're Josephine County. Wow. Yep. Look at that. You have one little tiny purple area, two little tiny purple areas, and the rest of your whole entire county is a danger zone.
So the purple areas, you see some there in Grants Pass, the big purple area in the western part of the state. That was a huge fire a few years ago, but that is not the perimeter of the fire. That's a perimeter of a township. So I don't, whoever made these maps, like I said, the methodology, the science is flawed. Now, let me draw your attention, Rick. There's a few other things going on in the political world. The way we pay for fire in Oregon is the lion's share is paid for by the large landowners, the big timber companies. Well, they used to be timber companies. Now they're insurance companies that own hundreds of thousands of forest land in Oregon. The other funding source is the general fund out of the legislature, pays for large fire costs through an insurance company called Lloyd's of London. So they pay a big premium for a big insurance policy. So when the landowner's money is gobbled up, the insurance policy is gobbled up, then the general fund picks up some more of the money. So this new mapping system, in my opinion, will change because it will encompass many more properties that'll have to pay assessments. That's coming. That's the next shoe to drop, in my opinion. So that'll take the burden off the large landowners and put it onto the smaller landowners because there'll be more of them. And it'll also free up general fund money. So the legislature is always trying to free up general fund money so they can go spend it on their pet projects. So that's one goal I think will be accomplished down the road. The second goal in the state of Oregon, we had Senate Bill 100 back in the 70s. And we're one of the few states that have statewide land zoning, okay? And it's all done through the legislature. Well, over the years, special interest groups like Thousand Friends of Oregon, an environmental group, has kind of hijacked that. And they have done everything they could in legislation to make it harder to develop rural Oregon or simply live in rural Oregon. And this helps them accomplish that more. It makes it more expensive, or you might not be able to get insurance. So this accomplishes the goal of Thousand Friends of Oregon in many ways too. So there's some other things that are going around in the background too that people need to understand, all in the name of making Oregon safer for wildland fire. Well, here's the little secret what it doesn't do.
I like you.
It doesn't apply to any federal managed lands, which makes half the state of Oregon. Doesn't apply to any of the federal managed lands. Nothing. Zero.
So if how much land is federally managed in Oregon? Do you know?
Oh, it's about half, give or take, but just
here's our state map. Here's their little drawing, and the timberland is not going to be in the Willamette Valley much. It's all out in
all that purple along the coast. The vast majority of that is BLM and Forest Service.
Okay, so that doesn't count.
Nope.
Under this Senate Bill 80, right?
Nope. Or Senate Bill 762. There's two bills involved.
What about Josephine County? What about your county?
72% of entire Josephine County is federally managed.
So you guys, that's this county, right? Okay, you see, there's Josephine right there.
Yep,
So
72. About 72% is federal lands.
So Herman's County has probably next to Malheur County is like mostly in this map, and yet 73% of that won't even count under this whole program.
No.
What a bunch of bullshit.
Here's another little, now that you got Josephine County there's 3 rivers in Josephine County. There's the Rogue River, the Applegate River, major rivers, Rogue River, Applegate River, and the Illinois Valley River. All the lands that are along those rivers are mostly irrigated, and they have been. And for the last 100 years, Oregon Department of Forestry has designated those thousands and thousands of acres, mostly farmlands, irrigated, as what we call the green belt. And so they've never been part of ODF protected lands. They have never had to pay assessments for fire protection because they simply can't catch on fire. They're green. This map will include those, and all those properties will be paying assessment in the future.
And they're in the orange, but they're really not orange.
No. How come Oregon Department of Forestry for 100 years has referred to them as the green belt and has not charged a fire assessment? Because they don't burn. They got a 100-year history of not catching on fire.
So Jay, do you agree with Herman, Jay, that this is an attempt by the state of Oregon or by legislators or by Thousand so-called friends of Oregon to keep people out of from developing rural Oregon and building homes out there and trying to push everybody into the central urban areas?
100%. It doesn't take too deep of a critical thinker to be able to draw that line. I mean, if you look at the origins of the map starting in 2020, well, in 2020, what was happening is people were leaving the urban areas like in droves, right? And they were moving to rural areas, rural Oregon, rural Idaho, rural everywhere. And so, this is an opportunity to prevent more people from leaving the urban areas because it's going to be more expensive to do so, and also push a lot of people who did or are living in the rural areas back to the urban areas. They've, in conjunction with these restrictions, they've also created new building codes for the urban areas. One of which blows my mind, that they took away all parking restrictions for multifamily dwellings, meaning you can build a 400 unit apartment complex and not have to provide one single parking spot under the new planning or building codes, but yet in the rural areas you got all these new ones. And so, yeah, I don't think it takes too deep of a critical thinker to draw that line.
So when did these notices start coming out, Garrett? Like, did people start coming in and saying, hey, wait a minute, this is, I mean, so you guys have known about this, but when did it become to this point where you're going, we got to start talking about this loudly because something's screwy here?
It hasn't been implemented yet. So we're right in the stages of implementation. And that's what's going on right now, Rick.
I see.
So
this is the newest map without the harsh colors to make it look mean and nasty.
So yeah, but it's still
palatable.
Yeah, it's still so flawed. We could spend all day.
Was this like a middle school project at some high school in Oregon? I mean, who came up with this map?
I'll give you an example. So I have 40-year history of wildland firefighting experience and wildland fire management, and I'm also an instructor in wildland fire science. So I kind of understand this space pretty good. So when we had that meeting last week, the presenter from Oregon State University, who was, using all the right language and terminology and talking about fire modeling and all of these things. And when it was my turn to ask, my first question to him was, how many years of wildland firefighting do you have experience? And his answer was 0. So the guy in charge of the map making has no experience. To be a wildland fire behaviorist and do modeling on how fire spreads across the landscape, first thing you have to have is years and years of experience. Then you have to have schooling, and then you have to finish your task book and be on several fires under a fire behaviorist and learn that world to be a fire. This guy, he's doing all the modeling, 0 experience. That's his words, not mine.
Well, it's the same in the forest industry too. You've got I don't call them environmentalists, I call them anti-logging attorneys and groups in Oregon, right in the county next to yours, Jackson County, go into the courts. The BLM and the Forest Service have vegetation management plans all set up, and to try to protect old growth and recreate old growth forests. And these folks come in, they go to a judge who knows absolutely nothing about what goes on in the forest. And we're now managing our forests through our anti-logging groups and courts rooms rather than foresters and people who understand the industry. And I think people in Oregon better wake up, because not just Oregon, that's all over the country, but Oregon specifically, because we're talking about this map. It's unbelievable that you got loggers who have been out there in those woods for generations. They know what's going on and they're ignored. And instead, some judge in a robe, because it tickled his ears, puts an injunction on a sale to thin so that we can get old growth. And the very fires that are starting, I had a conservationist tell me in one of these series we're doing on Truth About Timber, the biggest hazard, the most dangerous thing to an old growth forest right now is fires.
It's correct.
Another person said the second is the courts running it. You don't have courtrooms that are deciding how we're managing our forests. And that's where the people of Oregon need to remember, this is federal land and some of it's state land, and you own that stuff. This is not theirs. It's ours.
Well, just remember, the federal lands are out.
Yeah.
And they're not, and they are not, the federal lands are not going to contribute to the wildland firefighting costs either. It's just going to be picked up by the citizens of Oregon.
Okay, let me show you one thing. This is for the viewers too, and then we're going to come back because I want it. Then if we can talk about what's the next step, how do we get this thing stopped? So hang on just a second here.
Through, and they have destroyed, I don't know how many little communities are gone. When any of the agencies or any of the industries try to actually do something proactive and try to do something ahead, it's, oh, well, we have to worry about the spotted owl, or we have to worry about, the marble murrelet. How many spotted owls are burned when a fire goes through and burns it? A fire doesn't care if there's a herd of elk in it. A fire doesn't care if there's a marble murrelet nest in it, or a spot that has to be protected. Fire doesn't care. It's going to destroy it all. Instead of managing the land and actually creating a job and prosperity for small communities, they just have locked it up, and all it is they burn it.
So if you guys want to see more about that, you can go we're releasing one a month. There's already one out there. You go to my YouTube channel. We also did 6 last year with different logging operations, talking about different issues out here. But they really are destroying, these rules are destroying rural Oregon. And I think rural Oregonians should be fighting. It's no wonder, this is a different topic, but it's no wonder so many counties have voted to try to become part of Greater Idaho movement, because they're sick of this, having no voice in their government, and they're tired of it, and if I was Tina Kotek, the governor of Oregon, and I had that many people considering wanting to leave, whether or not she thinks it can happen or not, I think I'd be having a conversation with those people to find out what the hell I'm doing wrong.
Well, I served with Tina Kotek for 8 years, and I guarantee you she don't care.
And neither did her predecessor.
Rick, I will tell you, I've done lots of presentations on forest fires because that's my wheelhouse and everything. And it's an hour-long presentation, so we certainly don't have time to do that. But here's what I always start when I start my presentations with people. You have to start from the premise that if you have forest, you're going to have fire. That's the first thing. And the second thing is forests grow up and then they disappear. That's just how it works. There's no forest around, with the exception of a few trees that were here 4,000 years ago. Okay.
Right.
They're just not. They grow up and they disappear. So how do they disappear? Well, they disappear by fire, or they disappear by drought, or they disappear by bugs. And usually if they disappear by drought or bugs, they disappear eventually by fire. So, or they disappear when we cut them down and we turn them into lumber and we replant them. Always remember, they grow up and they disappear. If you start with those two premises, that we always have fires as long as we have forests, and forests grow up and disappear, if you start with that, you will understand how this works a lot better.
And isn't it better to cut those trees and store the carbon rather than to wait for them to burn, so that
and release the carbon? Yeah.
Release the carbon back into the air. If these folks are so conscious of carbon and counting carbon, and we have carbon credits, which is another whole bullshit thing, and you got all this carbon stuff, and yet we right now over the whole Pacific Northwest, is more carbon than you can than probably Portland puts out in a year, hanging
So
on
do you,
top of us.
you remember about 4 years ago, the Oregon legislature had the carbon tax
Uh,
and the Senate left and stopped it?
yeah,
You're looking at the Senate leader. That was me.
you're the troublemaker.
I'm the troublemaker.
You put about you were well. Thank you for doing that, because that took guts. I mean, because you could
We stopped it. We stopped the carbon tax.
Yeah. Well, so Jay, what is for Curry County? What would be the next step? This map is not finalized. The plan is not kicked in. What and we're going to have Yamhill County. There's a commissioner up there who's going to be on here. Obviously, a number of county commissioners and people throughout the state understand what's going on here. What do you do now?
Well, I think we have to, we have to come together and look at it, my opinion, in two different fronts. We have to, number one, we got to figure out the best way to push back and fight back on this map in its entirety. But in the meantime, we also have to deal with the realities of this map and what it means to our communities. And so, I know, Herman has a little bit of direction on the possible pushback. He has much more knowledge on those things to be able to coordinate us and get us in the right direction. In terms of dealing with the reality of it, I know that one thing that we're discussing in Curry County is essentially drafting an emergency declaration, and basically saying, hey, we're in a state of emergency due to the mismanaged federal and state lands, of which 73% of our county is federally managed, and due to this mismanagement, we are now subjected to financial and physical hazard, and we are going to demand that these areas begin to get mitigated using this map as part of the evidence to do so. So that's one thing that we're examining right now.
I like that. That's kind of smart.
And I don't know how it'll go, but I think we have to get a bit aggressive with this and push back. And it's the one way that I feel like I can. If you can, I'll just show you, just to sum up,
Okay.
how bad this map is. I can't even put the word in. Pull up the one you have of Harney County and Malheur County, that little close-up you got. So right there in the center of Harney County, there's two great big purple, like a circle and an oval, right kind of in the center. Those are identified as moderate risk. Well, those are lakes. Those are two of the largest lakes that we have, and the entire lake itself is considered moderate for fire danger. Now, I don't know how that is even possible, but that just shows the lack of integrity that this map actually has.
Right. Well, let me ask you, since we have this pulled up, and I've done a lot of work in another lifetime in Lake County. That's a pretty dry place. Look how blue it is. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's purple, and that's all dry. That's not a green belt like Herman was talking about. And there's only really a couple towns in Lake County, and I'm sure one of those is that map. Look at Malheur. It looks like somebody just kind of puzzle pieced it together. To me, but I'm not a map guy, but so
Well,
Herman, he alluded to the fact that you had some other ideas.
So yes, I think doing a declaration of emergency county by county is good. The next thing is, unfortunately, we'll have to wait till it's implemented. But once it's implemented, in fact, that's why I was a little late getting on here today. I was on a Zoom call with attorneys up in Portland, and there's going to be a lot of people that is adversely affected either by insurance rates or what they can do and can't do on their properties. So they'll all have standing in a class action lawsuit.
Oh,
Okay. And so, but we have to wait until this is implemented. And then the third thing that I'm working on, Rick, is I am having some conversations with the governor's office. And even though the governor and I don't see eye to eye on things, I think she's well aware that once I sink my teeth into things that they stay sunk. And so we're starting to have some conversations because, as I put it, it would really be interesting to get insurance companies and to be able to depose them in a courtroom along with the people that created this map. I think those depositions would be quite interesting.
oh yeah.
So there's a few things going on. If we can negotiate this out with the governor's office, which I've done things like that before, we'd probably be a lot better. So we'll just keep, but we're working. So it's kind of a 3-prong approach, but here we go.
Yeah, because what happens if, I mean, let me get this Oregon map. Look at all those people who could, like, what if you bought timberland, as your retirement, and you had the 20 acres and you had some timber on it, and now this happens. Look at all the properties that are going to be devalued, or it's going to be so expensive to be there. And people should look at and think about, if they want to see, how does this relate to me? What if you're trying to sell your house? And all of a sudden now the insurance for the person who wants to buy it is way higher, or you've got to put new boards on, or whatever it is, a new deck is going to be steel, all that stuff. It starts impacting every single Oregonian. And then you got a problem.
Well, all I know is it's not good for the citizens of Oregon. I think there's alternate motivation to do things, motives that are behind this, that are not being shared. And these things take a long time to work things out. So you're looking at a 5-year plan to get where they want to go. Okay, they were not going to do it overnight, but they got to get this map first.
But it's already affecting people's fire insurance rates, though.
Yes, it is
Crazy.
So, or they can't get insurance. I've talked to a couple insurance agents that my company that I represent will not insure my clients anymore. So it's already happening.
But Herman, the legislature said that it wouldn't impact fire rates, so it can't.
Okay, Oregon has a tendency to do what California does.
You think?
California did the same thing, and then the state, so you couldn't get insurance. So then the state created the pool, the insurance pool. Oh. So if you can't get insurance, you go to the insurance pool. The insurance pool is made up by all the insurance companies. Okay, but the legislature is now the agent. So the insurance companies don't have to have agents anymore. The state is the agent, and the state sets the rate. So if you can't get insurance from an insurance company, you can get it from the insurance pool. The question is, how much does it cost, and what is it going to cover? You'll be surprised.
Let me ask you one last question. I'd have you on to talk about that sometime too. But let me ask you one last question. You said earlier something that, and I hope I'm not opening a can of worms. I probably am. But you said insurance companies own a lot of this timberland. What's that all about?
They're investments.
So they're buying it from private timber owners?
Mm-hmm. So if you go back 50 years, most all timberlands in the state of privately owned timberlands were these, let's call them family timber companies.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty much gone. Most of that's gone, and they've these insurance company buys them for investments, is what they buy them for. It's really interesting. When I was in the Senate, I was vice chair in finance revenue, and every year we get a book from the IRS because the state is connected to the federal tax code in certain ways. So we always get the changes to the tax code. Well, it looks like an encyclopedia every year, but anyways, or every other year. So I'm looking through that book one day, Rick, and I see this. Hey, they're going to change the capital gain rates on large land transactions. And I mean large. It had to be, I don't know what the amount was, 50,000, 100,000 acres. So they're lowering the federal capital gains tax on these huge land transactions. And I thought, well, that's interesting. What's that all about? 2 years later, Plum Creek, the largest landowner in the United States, sold to Weyerhaeuser.
Huh. There's always a backstory, isn't there?
There's always a backstory. Welcome to politics.
Herman, Jay, and Garrett. I think a lot of people are going to be happy to know this. I mean, it's not going to make their day, but it's not too late for people to get in rural Oregon to start fighting this. I think one other thing I would want to bring up too is one of the big problems in a lot of places in this country, but this is where it shows up in Oregon, is most of the voters are in the green. And they need to care about what happens to Oregonians who are not in the green. And that's always been a problem in Oregon in the last 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And it's a growing problem. But, rural Oregon is too cool and you guys do stand up. I mean, Curry County, good for you. You guys got balls. And Herman, you do too. But hopefully you get this thing going. And would you guys keep in touch with me too? So that as this goes along, I'd love to do more. I think the more you can educate people and get them to understand that the better off we all are. And I know you guys do too, or you wouldn't be doing this. Any last comment, Jay, Garrett, Herman?
Thank you very much, Rick. I got to go to another Zoom call in 7 minutes.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Jay, thanks again. And thank your employee for giving me the story to let people know what's going on here. I think this is super, super important. And I know you guys are kind of laying yourself out there on the fillet, to get filleted, but you live on the coast. You're used to that,
Yeah. And, good analogy. Well placed.
Yeah.
I would just say that I'm thankful that you're bringing attention to this matter. I've been kind of screaming at the top of my lungs for this for about 8 months, and a lot of people who are getting these insurance increases or non-renewals, they don't understand that the root cause of what's creating it. So they just a lot of people just think they're a one-off, and it's just like a stroke of bad luck. And I want to make sure that people understand that it's not an accident. Right. There was no issues with insurance regarding fire insurance or homeowners insurance prior to this map being created. So this is definitely an intentionally caused issue that we need to push back, but we all have to be understanding of what's causing it so that we can push back together.
Right. Super good point. Yeah, I feel like, Jay, that people are starting to understand, but you guys normally, just like Herman was saying, you could crack this thing open. This is a rabbit hole. And if you think it's just to protect Oregon, that this is about getting people to move back into the urban areas, keep people from going out into rural areas. That's been going on in Oregon with 1,000 Friends for 1,000 years. And it's never as simple as it seems. And the sad thing is, in my opinion, rural Oregon ends up usually paying for this bullshit. And absolutely. And you guys, and the good point is you can fight back, push back. I like fight, but pushback is a good word. All right, Jay, thank you so much. Garrett, you too. Thank you for that information on what that does. I think you hit, Garrett, you got the rubber where the road is. That's what people are listening going, okay, but what's it going to cost me? And it's nice to have you here so you could explain that to people, because you're the one who's going to go out there and see it and watch the people go, good Lord, steel beams under a deck in
in coastal weather, where it's going to rust and you're going to be replacing that stuff more often than you would anything else.
Oh, sustainability. Come on, Jay.
Right.
Come on, it's a buzzword. We want to be sustainable as long as it's not me.
It's so funny, the hypocrisy. I just want to close with this
Okay.
timber that you were talking about. I was I'm from Harney County, and so I was 12 when the um, Endangered Species Act was coming on, and my grandpa spoke on the House floor, and I was at the Senate when that happened. I didn't understand the magnitude of it until I got home and I saw our largest employer shutting down, but one thing that I remember extremely well is right then there was this giant political attack on timber. And if you remember, it was they started this whole movement where paper bags were bad, plastic was good, right? And now you can't find a plastic bag anymore, right?
No.
Otherwise, you are absolutely enemy number one. And it's the same people who drove the issues then who are driving the issues now.
Right.
And that is it's not being led with common sense or with humanity's success in mind. It's all of these special interest groups who have multiple different motives, who are pushing things on our value system and our way of life, to I guess better impact theirs. And so
And what I think Jay, one of the troubling things to me is I really do believe people feel like they don't have the right to push back. And I hope and pray that the reaction to COVID woke us, not woke, how about awokenness, awakened us to something that realizes that if we don't, freedom isn't free. If we don't fight for this stuff, they will walk right over you, or Trump's be worse, sneak around behind your back and do what they want to do. And that's why we need people like you and Garrett and Herman and people out there going, this is a bigger story than this. There's much more going on. Yeah. So thank you guys for being here. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Hang on for just a second. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So there it is. Something I hadn't heard about. Probably you haven't heard about. You guys, do you see how this stuff stacks up? I mean, it's like crying to you to say, if you love Oregon, and you really love this place, you got to fight for it. It doesn't just happen. You can't just elect people. Newsflash, you can't elect people and expect them to go do the best thing. And they certainly aren't doing the best thing for rural Oregon. So hopefully your governor wakes up and realizes that she represents more than Portland, Salem, and Eugene, that she's got a lot of rural people there that are depending on her as well. And you guys go fight this thing. Do not take it lying down. I'm Rick Dancer. Share this on your page so others can see it. YouTube is going to do me no favors. None of the social medias are. I'm depending, just like we're depending on you to save Oregon, I'm depending on you to spread this story. So that's your job. All right. We'll see you later. Have a good evening. Good night.